If you have an accident or you fall ill, you go and see your doctor or go to the hospital. But what happens when a doctor becomes ill? What do? Well, realistically, they do exactly the same thing, and they go and see their GP. But I think sometimes people don't realise that just like everyone else, doctors face things like managing chronic health conditions, becoming acutely unwell, as well as mental health problems, like addictions or other problems. There are other things that we see far more commonly in people that work in healthcare, like burnout or moral injury. And there are some things that are specific to those groups of people. For example, like the stress that you may have when you're going under regulatory investigations. Not only do they have specific problems that they may need specific treatment for, but when they become ill and have some time off work, that obviously leaves a gap, and there are even fewer doctors seeing the same amount of patients. And so it's really important that we actually look after our healthcare professionals if we want to have a well-functioning healthcare system. Today I want to talk to you about Practitioner Health, which is a service that looks after these specific people, the healthcare professionals and the doctors that I'm talking about, and tries to help them with those specific problems that come with being a doctor or someone that's working in healthcare. I also want to catch you up on what happened over the last couple of weeks and how this has actually put the future of the service in jeopardy. And lastly, I want to tell you how this is an incredible service that we cannot afford to lose. How do I know? Well, because I've used it. So before we go any further, I want to give you a case. So you're a GP, you're sat in a GP service, and a 22-year-old man comes in with a presenting complaint of low mood. As soon as he walks in, you can tell that he's quite teary, and you ask him about his panic attacks. He's been having panic attacks for the last couple of weeks, and they've been getting steadily worse. But it sounds like he's had moderate or severe anxiety for the last couple of months. It also sounds like he's maybe got some depression going on. He's had low mood, he's been struggling with early morning waking, he cries when he wakes up in the morning, and he thinks that he's been losing weight. He's currently a medical student at university, and recently his exams have got much harder and he's been in placement a lot more. When you talk about drugs and alcohol, he's been drinking since the age of 17, and this is fairly regularly, and it sounds like he's been binge drinking, especially in his time at university. He goes on to report that he actually struggles with gambling, and he's been gambling since the age of 18 when he got into it from free promotional bets. He reports that this causes him a lot of stress, he often has to borrow money, and financially he's struggling at the moment. You go on to ask him about risk. He doesn't report any risk to others, and you find out that actually he is having thoughts about both harming himself and killing himself. He reports that he's made no plans, and he expresses no wish to act on these thoughts. He has good friends that he lives with and a supportive family. So that was how I presented to my GP when I was a fourth year medical student. And I was very lucky. I had a very good GP. I had to postpone a couple of exams, but managed to not drop out and continue with my studies. And my mood recovered. I stopped being so anxious through various treatments of talking therapies and medication. And going on from there, I managed to, control my gambling. And although it took me a bit longer to get a grip on that, I haven't gambled since the 16th of August 2016 now. And that was a really hard time for me. I did a few things, to try and help my mental health. I tried to increase my fitness. I stopped drinking for a bit of time. But going on from there, I started my F1 job, so your first year as a doctor. And obviously in the back of my mind, I was very aware that I'd been ill 18 months before and, whether I'd be able to cope. And luckily, my first jobs were in a very supportive hospital and I really enjoyed them. But I did realise just how fatiguing, how stressful, the work actually is. And then going into my second year jobs, so my F2 year, unfortunately I had a less supportive job, and that's where things started to unravel. I increasingly became more burnt out. I felt like I was doing things that were way above my pay grade, making some really difficult decisions, and I wasn't able to deliver care that I wanted to deliver in a very short system. So that became increasingly bad over the course of a couple of months, to the point where my mood and my anxiety actually started to really deteriorate. And I remember at that time I just finished an on-call, and it was a whole weekend on-call, and I was running around the hospital. I was on ward cover, so basically anyone that becomes unwell on the wards you are called to see, and then from there you try and treat them or escalate them to ITU if you need to, or things like that. So you're running around, it's really stretched. There are so many sick patients, and I was just so ready for the shift to be finished. I gave this handover to a bunch of very, very burnout doctors on the night shift, and then I realised I'd forgotten my keys, and I had left my car keys somewhere in the hospital in the many wards that I'd been going to throughout the whole day. I was running around the wards then for about 20-25 minutes, just trying to find my keys, trying to replace my steps, and eventually I found my keys, and I was so happy in that moment. And I skipped out the hospital, feeling really happy, and I got in the car and then I just cried, and I don't know what it was, but I was so emotionally drained at that point. And that's when I realised that I really needed to go and seek some help. In the meantime, my GP had actually changed, and he'd retired extremely early. I think he probably was also burning out, which is a real shame because he was an absolutely amazing clinician. But I was then faced with, this unknown of what will my GP be like? Will I be able to confide in them? And I had all these thoughts about, am I relapsing? Am I burnt out? Am I depressed? Should I be able to do this? Am I just not strong enough to do F2? Am I able to be a doctor? And then there were other questions like, what will happen to my training? Will I lose my license? Who can I tell at work? I probably need to tell someone at work, but who can I trust? So I did as I did before, and I booked in to see a doctor at my GP service. And that is where I met Dr. Helen Garr, and thank God I did. Immediately I knew that Dr. Garr was someone I could talk to about these things, and very quickly she told me about Practitioner Health. So she told me that PHP was a service that specialised in treating healthcare professionals and doctors. They do things like doctors' mental health, help them with things like addictions or detoxes, and also supported them through things like indemnity issues or fitness to practice cases, and deal with all of those things that are actually a real added stress to doctors when they become unwell. What will happen to my license? What will happen to my training? Will I lose my job? Do I go on sick leave? What happens to my patients? All of these things that actually make it even harder when you are unwell as a doctor. And instantly I could tell that Dr. Garr knew exactly what she was talking about, and it made me feel so much better. Like I said, she referred me to the service, and then instantly we got much longer appointments. This meant that she could actually assess me fully and ask me about those concerns around the GMC, around the fitness to practice, around my actual work and my training. She helped me navigate the actual practical things that I needed to do in order to make sure that I was fulfilling all of the requirements as a doctor that becomes unwell. She wrote a letter to my supervisor, and she referred me to talking therapies that ultimately were so essential in my recovery. The whole time she made me feel heard. She treated me with empathy, dignity, and so much respect. And I am so grateful that I met her. Following that job, I went on to do a public health job, and just the pace and the stress was so much better, and it was really helpful for me. I was really lucky that I was able to recover from that bout of burnout. But since then, my time in medicine and my own stress and mental health, it's not all been plain sailing, but I take so much reassurance from my time being treated by PHP that there is a service there to look after us when we need it. And this isn't just about doctors. We need doctors to be well looked after. We need doctors to be healthy so that they stay in work and that they are safe when they're looking after patients. I look and think about the medics of the future. I think about the F1s that have just been plonked into some random corner of the country. They've had a university experience that has been completely changed by COVID. They're joining an already striking workforce. This means they're going to be starting those F1 jobs that I found so tough and so tiring, away from any friends, any family. And so things like PHP are vital for those F1 support network. And in general, medicine is really hard and overwhelming at points, and we need to have a service that is there to support us through those difficult times. Why am I telling you all this? Well, earlier this month in April, NHS England decided to stop all new referrals to PHP, as they were currently going to review the whole service. Now, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I understand how commissioning works or how they decide, what service to go for. But for me, this is a service that is absolutely vital. And in my opinion, there's been a lot of things that have been really not in the best interest of doctors that have been coming out lately. And this was the final straw. And I felt like I had to express my opinion. Thankfully, I was not the only one that had a really horrible, visceral reaction to this. And there are some fantastic leaders that are, I would point out, not in leadership positions necessarily, who are doing some amazing work in safeguarding not only our doctors, but also our patients. And really, I want to thank Dr. Rachel Clarke, who is one of those leaders who wrote an open letter to Victoria Atkins and Amanda Pritchard, expressing her concern about stopping PHP as a service. Thankfully, from that pressure, in literally a couple of days, NHS England went back on their decision and decided that they were going to give an extension of a whole year in PHP whilst they reviewed it. But I think it's really important that we keep that pressure on and demonstrate just how valuable the service is in the meantime. What happens when that year is up? Things like burnout, addictions, mental health problems, medical legal cases, they're not going away. And this is an environment where I believe that doctors are facing more and more challenges, and that kind of brings me on to my final point. In my opinion, I think there are more and more challenges that are facing doctors as a group of professionals. And although medical Twitter is a pretty wild place, you can get a real feel for just how much doctors are struggling. I don't really want this channel to turn it into a place where we discuss all of those issues, but I think part of the reason that we are struggling is because there seemingly is a lack of representation in our leadership. I think that has come out recently in the Royal College of Physicians in the way that they have handled their sort of extraordinary general meeting recently. And I literally just got my MRCP, and I must admit it really tainted the whole thing, and it's made me really reconsider who is acting in our best interests as a profession and where are the leaders that we actually need. And this also inspired me to make this video. More and more I see people like Dr. Clarke who are putting their hand up and being advocates not just for the interests of doctors but also our patients. And that is the crucial thing. Doctors want to do good work for their patients. And having things like PHP to support doctors' mental health, to be there when they are struggling, that is ultimately so good for our patients. So I wanted to just touch on that and extend my sincere gratitude to people like Dr. Clarke who will continue to do work that demonstrates so much leadership and so much care. And I think we need to treasure these individuals. Like I said, I think we need to keep the pressure on to keep PHP and services like that, because as we're looking at the future, I don't see these problems going away, and I see these services being more and more vital. So I hope that this personal testimony, one, has maybe helped some other doctors that are maybe going through it and has pointed you in the direction of PHP, which is a fantastic service, but two, helped with that fight to keep things like PHP alive and maybe inspired other people to give their opinion. You know, I think doctors, we're just people pleasers and we are very good at doing exams and doing what we're told. But sometimes we have to confront things. And my last point was that it was a personal thanks to Dr. Rachel Clarke, Dr. Helen Garr, who is the boss of PHP now. If you are interested in any of these topics that we've discussed today, I'm hoping to meet people like Dr. Rachel Clarke and Dr. Garr, who are both speaking at the Wounded Healers Conference later in the summer. I will link stuff in the description and put stuff on the screen now, but I will be attending that. And it's something that I really care about. And I think we need to look after one another so that we can look after our patients. And like I said, if there are any issues that we've touched upon that you are struggling with, I will leave the PHP website down in the description, as well as some other things. And please reach out, speak to someone. If you know that someone is struggling, or you know someone that's about to start medicine, maybe just send them this video, and I hope it's helpful for them as well. Please like this video. I think it's really important that we get this message out there and keep the pressure on with regards to PHP, continuing as a service. And subscribe to the channel if you're interested in this kind of thing. And I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Thanks.